And before we get started, I would like to ask if anybody has any announcements. And by the way, I'm Sarah Gomez, the Assistant Director of the Environmental Studies Program, who hosts these talks every week. Announcements, everybody, anybody?
So every week, Tufts Climate Action hosts a mini rally in front of Baloo. I don't know if anyone just saw that, but it was going on from 11 to noon today. And we are going to be doing that every week until Tufts divests its endowment from fossil fuels, which they have millions of dollars invested in fossil fuels, if people did not know that. And if you'd like to be a part of this protest, you can like TCA on Facebook or follow @Tufts Climate Action on Instagram, and you can hear about when our protest is going to be every week. So we hope to see you all there.
Thank you. I did see them. I actually invited to come over to the talk when they were done with their protest. Any other announcements? No? Okay, let's start with our presentation. So today is a very special talk, and as I just saw in front of my own eyes, we are at a time where we are being led by children and young adults all over the world. And today, I'm very excited to say that we have our youngest speaker ever. And at 17, she's already a mover and a shaker in the environmental activist world. And we have Elliot Trahan, who is a sophomore, and he's going to introduce our speaker. And he's also going to say a few words about the Sunrise Movement chapter at TAPS. So, Elliot?
Thank you so much. Stole some of what I was going to say, but that's okay. I'm so excited for today. But first, I have a question for you all. How many of you all, actually just raise your hand if you've ever experienced a snow day? Pretty fun, right? Now imagine that school got canceled, not because there's too much snow, but because there's too much pollution in the air for you to be safe to go outside. Is that right, Saya? Yes. Oh man, okay. See, the sign was sad about it too. This was her reality when she went to school in Iran, where she's from. And so because climate change is not just some like distant threat, it's something affecting her and people she loves right now, she sprung into action, like really taking the lead in a lot of awesome ways, as Sarah's already mentioned. And she represents, on a national level, the Sunrise Movement, which we are a part of and which you can get involved in right here at Tufts. Demara's super excited too. If you feel inspired by us today, which I know you will. Anthony, what has Sunrise Tufts been up to?
All right. So Sunrise Tufts is, as you said, a part of the national movement. So we have our own hub on campus. A few weeks ago, we led about 500 students to the climate strike in Boston, where there were about 10,000 people that showed up. We also are getting involved in local elections, supporting candidates and incumbents that have a similar ideology as us. So they're supporting the Green New Deal and climate justice legislation. And we meet every other week at 8 o'clock in the terrace room. If you guys are interested, come to our table afterwards and we can get you connected. All right.
And well, without further ado, the youngest speaker ever invited here, Ameli Hajebi. Heck yeah!
Woo, thanks. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you so much. Cool. Without further ado, I'm just going to hop right in. Today, we're going to be talking about moral disruption, what that is, what it means, and how it has basically given youth power to make some serious, lasting change. Before we move forward, I just want to take a quick poll. Just raise your hand if you're believe that climate change is real, man-made, and needs to be stopped. Okay, great. I'm happy that we all agree. So raise your hand now if you are a climate activist going out every day and organizing to beat climate change. Okay, I see fewer hands up, but we'll work on this. We'll work on this. Okay, so first, I want to just start off with a little bit of background. How we got where we are now. I think it's important to start from the very beginning. And this is actually the first piece of research that came out telling us that if we keep putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, that the planet's gonna warm. Just take note that this was in 1896. We have known for over a century that this is an issue, and yet we're still fighting now, and we have not seen the action we need yet. Back then they called it on the influence of carbonic acid in the air upon the temperature of the ground. We've since shortened it to climate change, but not much else is different. So, again, hopping through the timeline, big corporations like ExxonMobil have known. They knew back in 1978 enough to say man has a time window of 5 to 10 years before the need for hard decisions regarding changes in energy strategies might become critical. They knew about climate change. They knew about the consequences, and yet, just a couple years later, the CEO of ExxonMobil, Lee Raymond, was arguing against the Kyoto Protocol in the UN, a piece of, a document that was going to get a bunch of countries to move towards a more renewable future, and they denied what they already knew. There's a lot we really don't know about how climate change will change in the 21st century and beyond. We need to understand the issue better. Fortunately, we have time. No, we don't. And they deflected responsibility. So this is Andrew Warren, a British campaigner in 2005, saying Raymond is no longer seeking to deny the science. Now they're just simply predicting an endless rise in the demand for fossil fuels. So it's been a journey. But in 1970, we had the first Earth Day. And for that one day, over 20 million Americans went out on strike for the climate. But the problem with this is that we only did this once. And then the energy just kind of fizzled out. We can't just come out once and ask for climate action if we're standing up against fossil fuel corporations and the industry that's going out every single day to make sure that their profits are not harmed. So we've tried. We've done activism, didn't fizzle out completely. We've been working on this, but have we been effective over the past century? Have we been effective in combating climate change? Have we seen a decrease in the fossil fuels that we are using? Have we seen a decrease in the CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere? Let's take a look. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with this graph. This is the atmospheric CO2 levels over time. And as you can see, for nearly the past million years, it's never been above that line. And yet, we've crossed that line, and ever since then, we've just kept spiking it up. So again, have we been effective? I would say no. And this is where moral disruption comes in. This is where things change. Maybe we haven't been effective with the way that we've been protesting in the past, but we've learned from that. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're standing on the shoulders of the past activists that tried and didn't get anywhere, and now we're making it different. So, what are we changing about our approach to activism? Let's take a look. I'm going to take that word apart. First part, moral. What does that mean in the context of activism? Well, we're no longer arguing over the facts. We are now drawing attention to the people. What does that mean? Well, we all speak different languages, but there's one universal language every single human being on this planet shares, and that is emotion, and that is love. And if we can connect the climate crisis and the effect of it to the people that are going to be harmed by it the most, that's how we can reach everyone. If I tell you the sea level is going to rise by a couple feet in the next couple years, what does that mean? I have to explain to you what that effect is. Well, what if you don't even live near the coastline? It's important to know that that's happening, but what's more important is to know the stories of the people that are going to be harmed by it. If I tell you instead that my friend in Boston has to move because their basement keeps flooding, or that their family has to have more pressure on them, financial pressure, because now they have to fix that leak, or now you can put that in perspective. Now you know what it feels. So again, people are already losing their lives to the effects of climate change. This is a picture of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. This is what climate change looks like. It doesn't look like the graph. This is what it looks like. It looks like all the people that don't have a home anymore. It looks like all the children who don't have a school anymore. And the reality is that people in lower income communities and communities of color are going to be hurt by it the most. And they contribute the least. They're not profiting off of fossil fuels. And they're the least prepared to deal with the financial consequences of the climate crisis. So when I say moral disruption, the moral part of it comes back to this, that it's about people. And it's about climate justice. So one of the main things that we're trying to loop in and integrate into activism and into the media now is the storytelling. Now, what's so important about storytelling? Well, if I tell you a story about how climate change is hurting real people, that makes it tangible. That brings this wide, overarching issue, this canopy, into focus. Now you can relate to it. Now you know what it would actually be like if you know the story. It can give an outlet for marginalized people to share their experience. If we can highlight the voices of those people in those communities of color who are going to get impacted by this the most, and we give them the space to share their story, we not only now have made climate change more tangible as a part of our daily lives rather than this vague idea in the future, but we've also created empathy and understanding between different kinds of people. How? How does this help? Well, climate change affects everyone. And if we are going to fight it and get the solutions that we need as fast as we need them, we need everyone to be dedicated, and we need everyone working side by side. And that means that those people of all different backgrounds and all different life experiences are going to have to come together. But we also have to come together with understanding. And by storytelling, we can make that more possible. We can help people work together better because now they understand where they all come from. Again, going back to this message that we only have one thing in common, and that is love. Love for our communities, love for the people around us, love for our family, and all those things are at risk. So if we can connect that to our stories, we can win. I want to just draw our attention to these two pictures up here. On the top, you'll see annual temperature anomaly. It's an increase in the temperatures of the planet. We've got a bunch of different research centers that have kind of put their graphs together on this, and it puts it in perspective for me, but not for everyone. If we're taking the statistical approach and sharing why climate change is such a big problem, we're missing the entire rest of the population who perhaps can't relate to that graph on the same level. Maybe it takes it's kind of more difficult to wrap your head around the numbers because it's not tangible. It's kind of difficult to put that in perspective for perhaps a working class family who does not look at graphs every day. But instead, if we go out and protest and the signs that we're holding up tell their own story, say green jobs for all, for the air we breathe, now everyone can relate to that. Maybe not everyone can relate to the numbers, but everybody can relate to these social issues that are going to rise. And that's why our messaging has been more effective. This is another example. If I show you this map of Jersey City and New York and the parts that are going to be underwater in a couple of years, well, you might be like, oh my gosh, wow. But if I show you this picture of a kid who's just watching bits and pieces of his house float away, now you might feel emotion on a much more fundamental level than you would seeing this map. And that's not to say that one is wrong and the other one's right. That's to say that messaging with the focus of people is much more effective for the wider audience that we're trying to reach. Another example is this graph of the temperature changes. And this actually is Lake Urmia in my home country of Iran. And it was the second biggest salt lake in the world, but now it's all dried up. And when you see how that temperature change has completely destroyed this, environment, that puts it into perspective a lot more than if you look at these maps with the range of where the temperature is going to rise the most. So now we get to the disruption part of moral disruption. If we're going to get the legislative change we need before it's too late, we need to be making headlines every day, putting pressure on politicians, and disrupting day-to-day life. Why? Well, because if any of you are familiar with the IPCC report that just came out in 2018, we only have about 11 years left. Less than 11 now, almost 10 and a half. But that does not give us a lot of time to slowly push politicians to take action and slowly push them to have actual legislation that's going to solve this crisis. So we need to be putting maximum pressure on them every single day. Again, we can't do the one Earth Day protest and bring 20 million Americans out just once. We need to be doing that consistently so that it sticks. I guess I skipped ahead with what I was saying. Again, we need to channel that energy back from the Earth Day protest and make it happen day after day. So I just want to introduce this super cool book by Erica Chenworth and Maria J. Steffen. It's called Why Civil Resistance Works. And in this book, they did some research and they came up with this figure. In the past century or so in the US, no non-violent campaign that engaged over 3.5% of the population as active participants for the cause has failed to achieve their goal. Let's take that apart. So That means if we can just get 3.5% of the population out and active every single day, we can make this happen. We can't fail if we have over 3.5% of the population actively taking action. And they also found that a lot of social movements succeeded on even less than that. It's super exciting. We don't have to get every single American out. We just need 3.5%. But again, this is not a number to laugh at because 3.5% of the population is about 11 million people. And it's not 11 million people once, it is 11 million people day after day putting their force behind the movement and actively participating, more than just showing up once. So what happens when we put the two together? What happens when we put our powerful messaging together with disruption of day-to-day life? Well, I just want to draw attention to one of the sunrise sit-ins at Mitch McConnell's office. The background behind this is, well, Mitch McConnell took millions of dollars in campaign donations from the fossil fuel industry. And then when the Green New Deal came around, he was a very active opponent. It makes one wonder, was there an influence? Well, we didn't just come out and stick to the numbers and say, hey, you took X number of dollars from the fossil fuel industry. We said, look us in the eyes. Look the youth of America in the eyes and tell us that the millions of dollars you took from the fossil fuel industry is not influencing your vote against the Green New Deal. Look us in the eyes and tell us you don't care that we're going to university or high school right now and we're getting a degree we can't use in a future that is tainted by climate change. Look us in the eyes and tell us you don't see those communities suffering day after day due to climate catastrophes. That sends a message he cannot ignore. Well, there's other ways that people have protested in the past too. And I just want to use this example because this was a really, really powerful protest that actually made headlines in, local in the Boston area. This was on the front page of the Globe. Protesters snarl morning commute on I-93 near Boston. But when you look at the pictures, you don't know why they were there. I don't know what message they were sending. And that's hard. Because these people put their lives on the line. They chained themselves to cement blocks and blocked a major, major highway. And when people talk to them, they were actually protesting for the Black Lives Matter movement. Very noble cause. Very escalated protest. People actually had to go to the hospital because they had broken limbs. And yet, the headlines don't reflect that. So how do we make that happen? This is a picture of sunrisers getting arrested for sitting in at Nancy Pelosi's office. And as you can see, everybody is wearing a t-shirt that either says Sunrise Movement or Good Jobs and a Livable Future. Similar idea. But it makes waves when it hits the media. Because now we know why they were doing what they were doing. And there's a couple of other examples of sunrise protests nationwide. As you can see, we never show up anywhere without our gear. It's just kind of our signature thing. And we say our message loud and clear and make it impossible to ignore. I mean, literally, look at how big these signs are. They're huge. And the messaging that we put on what we take with us is also reflective of what we need to get done. So we use kind of provocative things like, we have 11 years left. What is your plan, Democrats? Green jobs for all. Here we have a picture of two really young kids who are holding, we need the Green New Deal. Oil and money or our lives. That sends a huge message. Because it's not just what's written on the page, but it's also who is holding those signs. And that makes all the difference. Because they have a lot more years left in their life to live, and if we don't do something about the climate crisis, they're going to be affected by it the most. Enter Sunrise. The Sunrise Movement has really taken this idea of moral disruption and just sprinted with it. So, for those of you who don't know, the Sunrise Movement is building an army of young people to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. May sound a little confusing, but climate change is very interconnected with the economy and this issue of jobs. Because oftentimes when we say that we need more legislation, people automatically think, oh my gosh, all the coal workers are going to lose their jobs. They're getting health insurance because of what they do. But what we're saying is that is very connected to what we're trying to get done here. Those coal miners can transition to sustainable jobs in an industry that is not in decline. The sustainable industry is on the rise. That we're not running out of sun, but we are running out of fossil fuels. And we're from all walks of life, backgrounds, experiences, and we have one thing in common. That is, we are young people, and we've had enough of inaction. It's a picture of when Sunrise went to the Capitol, and this was kind of right after Alexandria Ocasio Cortez first proposed the Green New Deal, and, funny story, we didn't actually know that she was going to be there and join us in our protest at Nancy Pelosi's office, but she did, and it was super nice. But Sunrise was only founded in 2017, and already we are making headlines all over. That's because our approach is different, our message is pointed and new. Like right here, you can see hundreds of young protesters confront McConnell over Green New Deal. Right in that headline, not only do you know what we did, but you know why we did it. And that's so important. So, just gonna take a breather, take a pause. That was a lot of information, but I'm gonna have a lot of more information that I'm gonna chuck at you in a second. So just take a quick second. Just take it in. Okay. Okay. Cool. Moving on. Okay. One of the first campaigns that we began with was the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge. You'll notice one of the signature Sunrise things is we don't wait for things to show up. We don't wait for our politicians to suddenly wake up one day and realize, you know what, I'm gonna be really moral and I'm not gonna take money from fossil fuels today. We're not waiting for that. We saw that they were taking money from fossil fuels and we took initiative and we wrote this pledge. And basically, it says, when I sign this, I will not take money from fossil fuels. And in just a couple of years or so, we've nearly gotten 2,000 politicians all over the country to sign the pledge. And this isn't by accident, because it's all been due to those targeted and intentional actions. all over the country. This is a picture of Sunrise Boston at the Massachusetts State House after a sit-in at Robert DeLeo's office. Robert DeLeo was taking over $40,000 from the fossil fuel companies, and he wasn't supporting any climate bills. So we took this pledge to his office, and we were like, you either sign this or we keep sitting here. And we kept sitting there. But one of the kind of biggest things about moral disruption is that you don't even have to get to your goal. So Robert DeLeo never ended up signing the pledge. But from all the pictures that we took and all the media outreach that we did, we reached thousands and thousands of people and showed them that Robert DeLeo wasn't taking action. So now, if before you didn't know that he was taking money from fossil fuels, now you did. And you were pretty angry because he also ignored a bunch of young people that were sitting in his office. Doesn't look too good. And I'll come back to this action in a little bit. Another campaign that we've put a lot of energy behind is the Green New Deal. So I realize that may not be something everybody is familiar with, but just to get an idea, who has heard of the Green New Deal before? Sounds about right. Awesome. That is largely due to Sunrise. And I'll tell you why. So the Green New Deal is actually a series of ambitious government projects. That means it's not just one bill, it's a whole bunch. It's an idea that will get implemented similar to the New Deal during FDR's era. And it means we're gonna have net zero greenhouse gas emissions through a fair and just transition for all communities and workers. You'll see this is like very much in line with the Sunrise values because again, we're also asking for a fair and just transition and millions of good jobs. Oh, look at that. Create millions of good high-wage jobs and ensure prosperity and economic security for all people. Invest in infrastructure, clean air and water, promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression. These are all parts of the Green New Deal. And you might be wondering, well, what does justice have to do with climate? And again, we come back to the people it hurts the most. And that is going to be those lower income communities and communities of color. And so that means that if we're going to have an effective climate bill, it needs to have those parts in it. I'll take you through the timeline. So Alexandria Ocasio Cortez proposed the Green New Deal on November 24th. And on the same day, Sunrise was there having a sit-in at Nancy Pelosi's office asking her to co-sponsor the Green New Deal. Back then, we had just a couple supporters. You'll see up there, we have 4. So if you had asked people, like, the Green New Deal is too good to be true, it's a dream, you know, it kind of was. Why? Because it didn't have that much support. Maybe it was too good to be true, but we changed that. Because we came back less than a month later with thousands of youth from all over the US. Almost 150 were arrested for sitting in at different offices in the Capitol building, and almost overnight, we went from 15 co-sponsors to 40. You know, I went to this action, I was like in the bus, I'm like cramming on my math homework because I have school the next day, and we're about to get home at 2. And we're just going through our news feed. And one after another, we're scrolling through, and politician after politician is signing up. All due to the fact that we took initiative. And we didn't stop. We didn't just do it once and never again. We came back time and time and again all over the US. This is a viral encounter with Senator Feinstein. Maybe you've seen the SNL remake of this. But essentially, a bunch of young people went to her office and they were like, hey, you need to support the Green New Deal. And she was like, you know what? I've done my job for many, many years. I know what I'm doing. No. And that message went viral. And even though not every single office visit and not every single phone banking event or sit-in was viral, we got so many more politicians to sign up that now the Green New Deal is part of the national conversation. It's impossible for a presidential candidate right now to not know about the Green New Deal and not have a position on it. We made that happen. So now if you say the Green New Deal is too good to be true, sorry. We have brought it into reality by creating the support behind it. And we're not done yet. You know, by the end of, by now we've gathered over 200 co-sponsors. We started with like 4. But the fact that we were able to get here in such a short amount of time is just evidence of how much power we have moving into the future and how much more we can do. Later on, we put the Green New Deal on tour. So we went to a bunch of different communities and just hosted events where you could learn about what it was and learn about the politicians in your area that were working to bring it into reality. And stuff like that makes this idea, this dream of having a sustainable future, of having equitable jobs, it brings that dream into reality. Bit by bit, we make it possible. What makes moral disruption so effective? I'd say it comes down to these 3 things: accessibility, visibility, and hope. I'll start with accessibility. Well, Sunrise has over 300 hubs across the country. So there's a lot of individuals that are extremely motivated. You all in this room just raised your hand. You do all believe that climate change is man-made and needs to be stopped. And yet when I asked, how many of you are activists? Not everybody raised their hand. So clearly, we have this huge potential because we have so many people already on our side. But now what we need to do is make it accessible for them to take action, to make a real difference. And we've done that by making it physically accessible to people. You shouldn't have to travel 100 miles to do a protest. If we can get the tools out there for how you can conduct your own sit-in at your representative's office or senator's office, you can make action too. And if we can, and again, this also comes back to the moral part of moral disruption. If we put the message into terms everybody can understand, we can reach everyone in our audience. What do I mean by visibility? Well, this comes back to literally holding up giant signs. It's so hard to ignore it when we're holding up a sign that says, like, which side are you on? Which side are you on, the fossil fuels or the youth? And this also comes back to highlighting the stories of different people. If we can show different faces of activists, if we can show different faces of people of color, we can make it possible for them to join too. Because when you look at a picture, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you immediately try to find yourself if it's like a group picture, right? And if you don't see yourself, you feel like you weren't like included, you weren't there. So if we can kind of put different people in the spotlight to make it more tangible for other people that identify with similar things to join the movement as well, we can win. I know when I was trying to join Sunrise. I didn't know that there were any like Muslim activists out there. I mean, most of what's in the media is, well, Iran's like in a whole different phase right now, so we're not going to talk about that. But if we can kind of highlight these different stories, and if I'm there sitting and I'm looking at like my newspaper or my wherever, Twitter, wherever I get my news, and I see somebody who's like of a similar background doing activism, that can open a space, because then I can see myself doing that too. And lastly, hope. This is crucial, because if we get too caught up with the statistics, and every single time that we hear about the next climate catastrophe that's hit a community like Florida, or if we get too caught up with the fact that California is burning up, or the Amazon rainforest is almost gone, it's so easy to get paralyzed and buried under all that negativity. We need to continue to hold on to hope. We need to continue to hold on to the fact that we can win if we can believe that we'll win. It's crucial. So, if there's one thing that I want everybody to walk out of here today, is with a reason about why you care, a reason about why you should be out there fighting too. And I'll share with you why I fight. So, as you mentioned in your lovely introduction, I'm originally from Iran. And, you know, for me, coming to the US, it was weird seeing that you could actually get involved with the political process. You know, where I grew up, the Green Revolution was happening. So that means there were a lot of young protesters marching down right in front of my apartment, right down my streets. And then they were getting beat down and violently attacked by the government. You know, one day, I remember I was about to go to sleep. I was like packing up my homework. I put it back in my bag, brushing my teeth, and suddenly I hear my parents talking in the other room. And they're saying, you know, that we should take a different route to school the next day because there's going to be a protester who's going to get hung in the town square. And obviously, my parents did not want me to see that, so we took a different route to school. But that's the reality that I grew up in. It was scary for me to think that you can actually come out, speak about your values, expect your government to hear you, and not fight you. And when that first Robert DeLeo action came, that was like last summer, and I wanted to go, you know, we were just like organizing and training for it the day before, and question gets raised, well, like, who wants to share their story at this action? You know, I immediately wanted to raise my hand, but, you know, I hesitated. What if now I would get deported? What if the US government fights me? And I had to get over that and take that leap of trust and believe in that hope that we really can get things done, move on, get up the next morning, and take a stand. And I want you, every single one of you, to think about your reasons, your story. Why do you need to be out there fighting alongside me and the Sunrise Movement as well? What's your story? Why do you fight? And that's it. Thank you. You've been a great audience.
Wow, thank you. I still have goosebumps. That was really inspiring, but also I think is a good reminder that we take for granted a power we have to make a difference that maybe we should be using more. So thank you for reminding us of that. And with that, we'll open for questions.
That was an absolutely lovely presentation. Thank you so much for that. One of my questions as someone who is running one of the environmental activism campaigns on campus, how do you convert passive supporters into active participants in protests?
It works. Hold on. Let me just take a quick temperature check of the room. How many of you guys now think that you might want to join the movement and become activists? Take a quick show of hands. Well, then that counts too, because you're going to continue being an activist, I presume. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it looks like there's more people that are now motivated to be activists now. So sharing stories and kind of connecting people with the reason why this directly affects them is the way to go. Because, you know, the majority of the population has heard about climate change and knows that it's a problem that needs to be solved. It's not that we need to convince people that climate change is real. We need to convince them that it's such a drastic part of their life that they need to be taking action now.
Thank you. Yeah, and if people want to get more involved, please join Sunrise and Tufts Climate Action. You can come talk to us afterwards.
So with the Green New Deal, is there like a time goal for those objectives to be accomplished? And like what do you think is like a realistic time or year goal for that?
Yeah, so we're trying to beat that deadline set by the UN report, so 2030. That's kind of the goal that we're trying to go for. And it really, really depends on how much we can push politicians to make that happen. So the next presidential election is going to be absolutely crucial because we need to make sure that we can elect someone who's going to stand up for those values in the Green New Deal and make it a reality.
I would like to ask a follow-up question on that. It's a two-part question. First, so for adults, we've seen in previous presentations this semester, denying climate change is usually a badge of identity and is usually related to party lines. Do you see that infiltrating among the youth? So is political backgrounds an influencer, whether they support this movement or not? And the second part of the question is, do you engage with any political endorsement? So if a candidate supports a Green New Deal, do you rally behind him or her? And do you do anything to engage youth to go to the polls once they are able to vote?
To answer part B of the question,
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. We endorse candidates who do stand up for these values, and they need to have signed the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge, and they need to be behind the Green New Deal. That's usually the basis that we go off of. And then we not only give them our vote, but we also give them our energy. So we go out and canvass for them as well. This weekend, we're canvassing for a bunch of different candidates that Sunrise has endorsed. And so not only do we give them our support, but we also give them the help to get them elected and put into positions of power where they can make those things happen. And what's the first part? Right. What do we do about the opposition? Well, the way I see it, there's only a couple people on the planet that are profiting off of the destruction of our communities, and that is the fossil fuel CEOs. They're the ones who really have something to gain because everybody else has everything to lose. And so to me, it really seems like a fight we should be winning because there's quite a few of them, and every single one of us. So it's just about activating that potential and that power.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. I thought it was wonderful, and I just wanted to first thank you for that. I have a follow-up question from our first question, which is around how do we keep people engaged? So you told me a great story that empowers you and that allows you to do these great things. A question and an issue I run into is keeping people engaged over the long term. What areas of strength do you draw from to keep yourself doing this day in and day out? And how does that relate to that 3.5% we have to get out and keep out there to start a movement?
Yeah. So, people join Sunrise because they care about the climate. Whatever initiating factor it is that gets them to show up to the first meeting, I don't know. But what gets them to stay is the community. So we work really hard to develop a safe community for anyone and everyone, and we work hard to keep it that way. So we also do a bunch of like random community events that don't have like a super outlined path to this is exactly how this furthers the Green New Deal. No, it could just be a movie night. And that's really powerful because your activist peers become your friends. And you keep coming to those meetings day after day because of the community, even if you're not feeling that hopeful that day. What does keep you hopeful is all these amazing people around you that are putting their time and energy behind the movement. And we're all volunteers. And we're dedicating hours and hours and hours of our time because of what we believe. And even if that spark just flickers out a little bit for a day, because there's so many other people in the community around you that still carry it, it's okay. Because you can draw from their energy and keep going. Yeah.
How often do you run into people who don't take you seriously because you're younger than them? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so pretty much. A very common sentiment within politicians is these young people, they're so young, so naive. But what we say as a response to that is, heck yeah, we're young, but we're not naive because we have just proved to you how much power we have. We just proved to you how much power we have because we took those 4 co-sponsors for the Green New Deal and we increased that support to over 200. So part of the reality behind that is just realizing how much we literally have done and putting that in the spotlight. Let's talk about the climate strike on September 20th. We have one of our amazing organizers right there, Ameli Hockman. We put together a huge strike over, the media is saying 10,000, but the reality, it was 25,000. Anyway, that was all put together by a team of activists, all under the age of 20. The Boston strike happened because of high schoolers and college freshmen. Evidence.
I just wanted to follow up on the question about how to keep the 3.5% engaged. I started volunteering with Sunrise over the summer, and what I wanted to add is from my experience with them is that other than they're an awesome group to work with all the awesome things that you brought up, but I wanted to point to the fact that it's really easy to enter at whatever level you can give. I started just volunteering they do orientation sessions, and I just volunteered as somebody to help organize the logistics. I like to cook, so once or twice a month I would go on a weekend and just cook a meal and bring it and share it. So it was with a busy, I have kids, I have a lot of things in my plate, but I really care about these issues. But I found myself struggling with that, always having a pressure to do more and more. But I felt let's start small and then go from there. And it's just over the months, it's been growing. I was also involved. More recently, they did this awesome action to get the presidential debates to have a climate debate. You know, we had some actions within the state to get the DNC within Massachusetts to support that. And so you just kind of, as you work with them, I feel it's really easy for you to kind of like expand, kind of realize what else you can give. So kind of, I just wanted to bring that up to kind of not have the sense, which I think is natural, to feel like it's like all or nothing. Like the more we can give, obviously, the better. But I just wanted to point that Sunrise makes it really easy to, they're very welcoming, all ages, all types, and yeah, just wanted to put that in there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. And on that positive note, we're going to leave it here, but we're going to thank our speaker one more time.